Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a soul like me. I once was lost, but now I am found. I was blind, but now I see. It was grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appeared the hour I first believed. I once was lost, now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see.
I once was blind, but now I see. Are we clear on that now part? Now doesn't mean the future. Doesn't mean I will see once I get around to it. People listen to that song and they love it. And there's, oh, that feels so good and everything. And now we're going to go off into my confused ways. I'm just going to, I'm going to get back into to my lack and my what have you, my unreality. No, I was blind. I was blind when I forgot. Now I see, because I remember. I may not have changed everything yet, but now I see. Now I see what must be thought, what must be done. This week is this is our third week of our principles, divine principles series, and the first week. What's the first week? Who remembers? Being. And what was last week? It was the universal principle of...
Absolute.
Yes, absolute unity. And very good. You weren't even here. She has a CD to look at. And this week is the universal principle of proper perspective. Proper perspective, which means let's get it all into perspective, people. Let's get our lives into perspective. Let's get our thoughts into perspective, because there are so many of them that perhaps aren't quite in the right perspective. We come here because we want to remember God. I don't tend to remember God better through my resentments. I don't tend to remember God better through my discussion of the economy. I don't tend to remember God better through worrying about my weight, my hairline, what's missing from my life, what I wish I had, and how much better it would be if I were there. And that's not what I have found, and I have proven it several times, because I have forgotten several times. Every time I remember, when I get it into perspective, God first. Which often means just sitting with a God thought. It doesn't mean figuring out God. Because that if I'm trying to figure out God just to get something, then I'm still focused on the thing. rather than, because there's nothing to be figured out in God. God is to be accepted for what God is. Well, how do I know what God is? Stop it. That's a distraction. That is a distraction. You know what God is, or you wouldn't come up these stairs. It's just that simple. You know what God is. Where it gets sticky is you can't tell me what God is. And because you can't tell me, and I can't tell you what God is either, let's be clear on this, because we can't verbalize the truth. There aren't the right words to describe what is. So all our words are essentially going to limit it somewhat. But in my being, in my getting quiet for a moment and simply being, I can be what God is. It's only lately I've been able to affirm in a whole way that the Christ in me is awake now. Because in the past, I used to do that in my early studying and practicing. I could do that, and I had amazing results. I had such good results that I started using that to try to get more results. And I thought, oh, okay, I've lost the function of that. I had to find a new word. I had to find a new word for me that would just allow me to be in my God place rather than my trying to manifest place, my trying to get something place. Even to try to get peace, to try to get love, to try to get joy. None of that works. The first priority must be within our proper perspective, because that's what we're looking to do. A proper perspective on living life is to be my God self. That doesn't mean sainthood. That doesn't mean to be nice. That means to just be. And to be okay with just being. Not being what my mother wants me to be or wanted me to be. Not being what I think I ought to be. It means to be. There's proper perspective. With that, there's no lack. There's nothing missing in me. There's nothing missing in my children. There's nothing missing in God. There's nothing missing in the world. And when I do that, all the other stuff seems to take care of itself. The universe starts to shapeshift. And all my needs are met. See, that which I know as God already knows what I want. Lord knows I know what I want in the physical world. But I cannot, if I want to live with first things first, proper perspective, declare myself as something lacking because there is a thing lacking in my life. Because there is a situation or a scenario in my life that seems to not be fulfilled. Many of us have gotten into the habit of finding things to fix in our lives and in our world. Okay, oh good, now I've got the job. Now let's work on the relationship. Okay, I've got the relationship, now let's get the house. Okay, I've got the house, now what do I, a car? Whatever, new mats for the car. No matter how much I get there, okay, now I can fix this, and now I can fix this. Because when am I going to be whole? At what point am I complete? At what point do I have everything? Many of us have had experiences in our lives, perhaps we have them now, where we have every physical thing every material thing we could want. Or we have the means to buy it. Now I know some of us don't, but some of us do. And those of us who do realize it's not the material world that is going to complete me. There's nothing wrong with having all the stuff, as long as I don't try to make it my identity or my lack of identity. I got a lot of stuff myself. When I was technically poor, I had a lot of stuff. And somehow I've always had a lot of stuff. I may not have had and I had a much smaller place to store it. Because then I used to think, oh, if I just had a bigger apartment, a house or whatever, then I'd have room. You know what? You fill up a bigger space. And you're still not complete. I have a relationship. I have a brand new car. I've got a great house or two. I've got I've got lots of clothes. I can afford to put gas in the car. I've got a job that I absolutely love. I've got friends in my life. I get to travel. I get to lead the glamorous life I desired when I was younger. And none of that makes me as complete as because when I do that, I'm not thinking about any of that stuff. None of it at all. Not one of those things. Oh, plus with all that stuff, I could still use a few things. I could still, oh, geez, if I just got along better with this one, if this one seemed to like me more, if I liked this one better. Oh, man, if there were like at least 3 more hours in the day to just sleep. And then 3 more hours to do the work I want to do. Okay, back to here. Proper perspective is, if I'm not doing this, it doesn't matter if the work gets done or not. It doesn't matter. I won't be present for my relationship. I won't know how to do my job at its best level, at its most appreciated level. Not appreciated by you guys, but appreciated by me. I'll worry that there isn't enough. I'll worry that all the seats aren't filled. I will worry if somebody doesn't show up for a volunteer position. I will worry that I won't be there on time. I'll worry that you won't be here on time. I'll worry. And I go back to an improper perspective. The proper perspective is, God is good all the time, therefore I am good all the time. The proper perspective is, God's not going to change what God is. Therefore, I'm not going to change what I am. And I'm not going to change what you are. That's proper perspective. And so, I can look at, I'm fine with all of you, but so I have to look at some people out there and think, okay, I have a problem with somebody here. I have a problem because I'm not seeing what they are. And when I don't see what they are, I don't see what I am. Hence the problem continues. And I stay out of proper perspective. The universal law, or the universal principle of proper perspective is, what is, and is never going to be what it is not. That's the law. Are we clear on that? The law is, what is, and it's never going to be what it is not. Therefore, everything I give meaning to that has no meaning is never going to actually have meaning. All the money I've given meaning to actually has no meaning. All the people and incidents that I've given meaning to actually have no meaning. The universal, the political world that some of us give meaning to actually has no meaning. I have a friend who takes truth classes with me, and she says, but I want it to have meaning. I want the love of my son to have meaning. I want it to mean something. That my mother thinks I'm a good daughter now because I didn't used to be a good daughter. I want it to have that meaning. I said, and I don't blame you. I understand. I want my relationship to have meaning. I want the love that I have for David and David has for me to have meaning. I want that I come to church and I come to work, that my job has meaning. Unfortunately, it does not have the meaning I've given it. I don't know what meaning it actually has. The only one that I can think of is that there is a path through every bit of it that will remind me of the God being that I am. I thought of the old story in Genesis of Joseph. Joseph went around bragging to his brothers when he was young. You know, one day you're going to bow down to me. Well, they didn't care for that. They didn't like that idea because they didn't like the meaning that it implied, that they would be subservient. And anybody who studied Genesis knows that on the way to his brothers bowing down to him, Joseph went through some hard stuff. I mean, he was imprisoned, he was beaten up, and well, his brothers left him for dead, threw him in a hole and left him for dead. He was rescued, he was put into, he's a servant, he's a prisoner, he's a psychic. He went through, and then he becomes a leader. He becomes a leader later. He saves millions of people through he saw the famine over here and the feast over here. Well, what happens? His brothers come looking for the feast because they're living in famine. He's the leader. They don't recognize him. What happens? They bow down to him, asking for food. And eventually, he reveals himself to them. And Genesis, I believe it's 50-50 or 50-56 says, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. G-O-D, meant for good. Meaning all good can come from the appearance of all evil. Therefore, is there any evil? If good can come from evil, then was it evil to begin with? Proper perspective. If abundance comes as a result of lack, then was there ever lack? Or was there just a journey? Neil Donald Walsh lived in a homeless park before he wrote Conversations with God. And even then, as just before he started writing that stuff, as he got a little bit prosperous, as some people started befriending him, I remember in the movie, the woman who was helping him get ready for work, he started to hit on her. He said, "Do you still have to be a predator with all that's being shown to you? Do you still feel you have to be a predator, trying to get something? There's such abundance being shown to you now, such love. Why are you being a predator? Just love and do what ought to be done by you." Eckhart Tolle, who lived on a park bench for a couple of years, on his way to helping so many people through the power of now. And what was the other one? No, the orange one. The Earth's Purpose, the orange book?
New Earth.
The New Earth. He went on to help himself so much. I hope or help others. I hope he's helped himself. But obviously he's living a life of material abundance. And we want that. See, how do I have material abundance if I'm talking about how much gas prices are? How do I have Edwin Gaines, my mentor, says that each of us ought to be able to have everything we want in the physical universe, not to waste, but to enjoy, to appreciate. There's no reason any of us should have to live in lack. In fact, she claims that each of us ought to get to the point where we are masters of materiality, not slaves of materiality. Proper perspective. We created all of it. We created everything in the physical universe, and yet we claim an absence of it. God didn't create the physical universe. God created that which created the physical universe. And so, now in knowing that, everything that I could ever possibly want or need is available to me. But I must get proper perspective. Seeing everything for what it is. Seeing clearly. Seeing it for what it is. If you look out and you don't experience peace, you're not seeing it for what it is. If you look out, now I understand, we look out, we see someone appearing to suffer. It's not about, ooh, it's not about experiencing glee. But there can be joy in seeing someone suffering, because you can have the realization, we don't have to suffer. There is something within us that says we don't have to suffer, and that's what the one suffering can help you to realize. And then you can sometimes do it silently, know it for that one. It's like the man at the fountain of Bethesda. Jesus said, pick up your pallet and walk. Always knowing, always knowing, always know. You may not know how, but you can always know that. I can always know that it is possible to live in total freedom. I can always know that it is possible, just because I don't know how yet. I'll get the know-how through with every thought that tells me it's too hard. I must interrupt it. I must interrupt that thought. With every thought that says I can't or I could accept for, I must interrupt that thought with my connection to God. When I first started healing, I used to do what 12 steps was the third step prayer. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me, to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help, of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. Every time I started misseeing someone, and I did lights and sound, that I worked with a lot of performers, and I would see them. They would have needs that I didn't, that egoically I didn't want to deal with or didn't want to perceive. So I would go off to either the restroom or the back room or something, and I would say that prayer. And what it was surrendering to the good that is. That's what that prayer really is doing. It's not asking God to do anything. God has already done it. If I didn't believe it was possible for me to experience peace, I would never say a prayer like that. God's not going to step in and make that person change. What will happen, though, is my getting proper perspective on the situation will allow me to see that person as they are instead of as they are not. That's what I want to do. I want to see each of you as you are instead of as you are not, because I want to see me as I am, not as I am not. I want to pick up a paper and see it as for what it is, not for what it is not. If I turn on a television, I want to see it and hear it for what it is, not for what it is not. And if it's too hard for me, then I need to turn off the television. I need to set down the newspaper and just know the truth. I won't know the truth in words. I will know the truth in being. I will know the truth in the I am of my being. And I will then see clearly. You ever meet those people that are so optimistic? They just see the light in everything. And while I may find them a little bit annoying, I am envious. I'm a little envious. It's like, how do you do that? You see the light. And I'm embarrassed right now that I forgot to. You see the light. Is there a technique to that? Is there some way to get it? Or is it just about the willingness to see the light? To see everything clearly for what it is? The universal law of proper perspective is seeing that what is not going to change. And what isn't will dissolve with one thought. Everything that isn't will fall away. Everything that isn't will disappear with the thought of the willingness that I am willing to see what is. This is a song cue, but I can see clearly now the rain is gone. All the other souls. This proper perspective is about our power of imagination. Imagination isn't about creating from what doesn't exist. Imagination is about creating from reality, creating the lives. I always say our power of imagination, which sits right here, it's our third eye. And it's one of the 12 divine mind faculties. And this power, this wonderful power, turns obstacles into opportunities. Turns forgiveness where there was once resentment. Turns abundance, creates abundance from lack. Creates peace from misery. Creates love from unwillingness. Creates me as I am instead of as I am not. Use your imagination now to begin to see what is in God, and therefore what is in you. Thank you so much.